Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parenting is Easy podcast, where we will discuss the pleasures and the frustrations, the good and the bad, and the rewarding and the troubling aspects of parenting. I am your host, Hananya Abraham, and I'm a psychotherapist that specializes in working with teenagers, young adults, and parents with a specific niche in assisting with communication within the family dynamics. While everyone has their own unique journey and experiences as a parent and as a child, there are many common affiliations and attributes that we can all relate to and share. Together, we will learn from personal stories and experiences from parents across many different backgrounds, cultures, and communities. So get comfortable, grab your glass of coffee, and let's get right into the interview. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Parenting is Easy, said no one ever. I am your host, Hananya Abraham, and today we have a very interesting topic that we have not talked about yet here, and one that I think many people will really enjoy and learn from. And I am joined by my guest, Anna Maria, who has been an author, and in her first book, Love at the Border, I guess you could say, her personal experience behind the scenes into the international adoption of a child. She is the mother of right now 2 young, wonderful women and loves hanging out with them together or separately, depending on any number of different factors. Over the past 20 years, Anna Maria has devoted her time and her talents to many nonprofit organizations focusing on women, girls, and families. He has been an avid reader of adoption books. Anna Maria knew that her journey was extraordinary, and her mission in writing children's books, something that we will be talking about today, is to encourage conversation between adoptive parents and children around trauma, separation, grief, and loss, so that all blended families can thrive. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anna Maria.
Thanks so much for having me.
So can you give us a little bit of a background from where not just this book came from, but your journey in becoming a parent and what that was like for you?
Well, as with many adoption journeys, ours began with infertility. So we tried for many years to have a child, and it initiated application with an adoption agency. And a few months later, just when we were finished our paperwork, I got pregnant. So we had a beautiful baby girl, but then adding to our family was just another impossibility. So we went back to the world of adoption and kind of picked up where we left off and explored many options. And then just through happenstance, found this agency in the Philadelphia area that was connected to the system in Mexico and proceeded, because at that point, our child was older. And I think we thought the time for an infant had passed us by.
So there are so many things to unpack over there. I really want to go first to that initial conversation that spouses will have together regarding bringing up the concept of adopting. What is that like? And where can there be some, I guess, more information that parents that might be even contemplating this, the people that would be in the pre-contemplation stages, where can they sort of start the conversation and approach a partner about it?
Well, because we had sort of crossed that bridge earlier, the conversation when we actually signed paperwork, for a second time was much easier. So, remember, initially we were faced with the possibility of never having children. So the conversation was, I knew I was called to be a mother. I knew we were called to be a family. So it was either that or we weren't even sure what the options were, but we decided to explore locally. And this was before, before internet, before, you could really do research.
Right.
And that's what I would advise any couple thinking about it, is really to talk to other couples, other families that have adopted. And that was really the source of our information. And we were pointed in the direction of this particular agency and went with that. So it's really a combination of things, but always, I hate to use the word networking, just being informed through others is really the first step.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there places where people can find the resources? Obviously, today with having much more connection when it comes to the internet,
Hmm.
what would you say are the places that people should be looking for the
Hmm.
proper help that would benefit them?
I would start local. And I guess the first decision that a couple would make or an individual would make for adoption would be domestic or international. So the landscape of international has changed a lot within the last few years, just because of politics, because of the conditions and circumstances of particular countries. So that's really the first decision to make. And domestic adoption, it's just more productive to explore resources in your own neighborhood, in your own state, where state laws would take precedent, and then kind of move on from there.
That makes a lot of sense. So there you are, thinking about having a child, signing the papers, and then being able to fortunately have a child on your own. What's
Mhm.
going through your head at that point that regarding the family actually growing, and that you're calling for be a parent is going to happen, and then also having this other idea about having another child another way. What's going through your head at that point?
Well, I can describe it as that we totally bought into the myth of adoption. So we were just happy with our little girl. Isn't it wonderful? Now we're going to add another little girl to the family. Isn't this great? And that went on for years. And so we were thinking about that. And just to fast forward a little bit, that's the reason that I'm writing the children's books, is that I say to my fellow authors and folks that are interested in my books that Disney has perpetuated the myth of adoption for years. And what I'd like to do is really encourage honest conversation between adoptees and adoptive parents so that they understand that all adoption begins with separation and loss and grief. And to acknowledge those things are the things that will increase the chances for a healthy family and how
Mhm.
families really thrive.
So you're saying it's through that acknowledgement and maybe even acceptance of loss and grief, where that connection to an adoption child can be budded and started.
Yes,
Okay.
and that the child out. We adopted our daughter from Mexico at age 7, so she had so many memories and so many uh, things, people, places, events, foods, smells, sights, sounds that were important to her memory. And uh, as depending on, of course, at what age, what adopt a child, those things are all so important to consider and to embrace. And it's part of your child's history. So it took a while, but again, we tried to do that as much as possible and ease that transition. But let me say, it took me a while to figure all that out.
I could just imagine. I want to back up over here and just talk about that area that I guess navigating that emotional roller coaster of both not having a child on your own at first, then having
Mhm,
that
mhm.
amazing news that you are going to have a child, and then over the next couple of years thinking about, okay, adopting a child. There's a lot of emotions that are running through uh, your bones over here, not just within yourself, but within your whole family dynamics. How can one that would be dealing with something similar, how can they manage or cope or deal with those that amazing but yet very, very difficult emotional roller coaster?
Well, it's really a matter of taking one step at a time. So in the midst of after having a child, of course, your whole world becomes that child. So we had not a thought of adoption for years. So the first couple of years, we went back to fertility treatments and were hopeful that we would have another child. And then as time went on, I mean, your whole outlook changes. So you're right. It's a roller coaster. You go from very hopeful to disappointed. And then even a few years into it, we became connected with an agency that after almost a year and a half of having our paperwork, and that takes fingerprints and psychological analysis and interviews and reference letters. They went out of business. So then we had to start all over again. I mean, it was just, you said roller coaster. It was just up and down, and we didn't, it feels like it will never end. So you really have to steel yourself. What is the end game? How important is this family? And we were motivated. We were motivated for finding, adopting a sister. We had requested within the agencies that we were working, we requested that we be considered uh, for a girl. Excuse me.
When it comes to, I just want to focus on that a little bit more over here. How about within the parents themselves? There's so many ups and downs, and this just hearing it from you that you go through the whole system, you're going through all this testing and hours and hours and hours and many dollars as well, and then the company goes out of business, and now you have to start the process all over again, and it could feel very, very lonely. So can you talk a little bit about the parents and what they can do for each other and with each other that can really benefit this journey? Not make it go faster, because I don't think they can, but I think being
Right.
able
Right.
to have each other's backs when it comes to this
Yes.
arduous journey.
Well, I have to say that we try to give each other grace and space, and not, I realized that because initially we were focused on infertility, and that's the kind of a monthly, we'll try this cycle and do this and that. And I was just so focused and determined. And, my husband said, well, let's just, take a break, and he was much more common sense, but I was just so intent on success that, um, following the doctor's orders specifically and doing as much research. I mean, back then, getting the phone book and just going to the adoption and calling every single person, every single listing. And it's good to have a partner that can, you know, talk you off the ledge. And we did that for each other a few times. So it's really a matter of knowing, that person better than anyone in the world, and what what does it take to persevere in a situation. You really kind of zero in on that and help each other.
Oh yeah. And I could see the partner being such a strong force in that, and really getting the roots down within the family culture that you're wanting to create. That, I think that's a very good point that you're
Mhm.
saying of having that and talking it out, and having that healthy balance when it comes to space, but yet also being support and also talking off the ledge all
Mhm.
at the same time. What can people that are in communities that, I guess you could say, are not just more family oriented, but are very, very procreating, and having a culture of uh, kids in general, but yet there are parents that unfortunately are not able to have kids yet, or they don't have kids yet, and they're trying to be in that community. What can you say, that I guess would be beneficial in a way to the couple to continue to be within the communities that they want, but yet also obviously feeling like an outsider based on their family
Mhm.
dynamics at the
Mhm.
time?
Well, to give yourself grace and space, because there are, events that you can choose to decide to invest your time in. There are many times, and I mentioned this in my memoir, that I was not proud of it, but, I began to just shy away from gatherings where, women who had recently had children, and just, it was just very difficult. It was just something to get through. And I go back to that phrase, control the controllables, and just see exactly what can I do. So at one point when we were uh, in the midst of all the infertility uh, treatments, I was reading up on things, and just again, I tend to just jump in with both feet. I went all herbal and holistic and massages and no caffeine. And 2 months after that, I was pregnant. So I was just trying to do everything that I could in my power. And, while at the same time, and also being hypersensitive to folks' comments. It was, you've got to really steel yourself.
Oh,
That's another reason to kind of limit interactions, but it's, uh, thoughtful. People can be very thoughtful. People can be very careless with their thoughts.
yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
it's important to be prepared for that.
Yes, yes, and I think that's something that having spoken to a number of people that have gone through infertility, that sensitivity is also heightened. So it could be something that someone meant in a very innocent way,
Right.
and
Of course.
and
Yes.
they're really meaning to the best, but the way it comes out,
Mhm.
or in that situation that it comes out in that place, can be very very hurtful and really have an impact on both the person and on the family dynamics in that sense.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a very, very important point over here. But going back to the adoption area of things and seeing what that process like, can you talk us out? You're talking about finding things local first, but the process itself, are there certain things, a certain mindset that parents should have beforehand to know what they're getting themselves into for the long run? Because it's not just something where you go online and like Amazon, it's there 2 days later. It's something that takes a lot longer. So, what would be, I guess, to say the guidelines for parents that are thinking about, or future parents that are thinking
Mhm,
about
mhm.
doing this process?
Just, well, I mean, big picture, lower your barriers, because all aspects of your life come under scrutiny, and that includes the kind of the home inspection or house visit, I forget, the home visit. You're writing essays about yourself. You're getting reference letters. You're filling out endless questionnaires. You have interviews at the agency. So there are so many things that, uh, you know, I was just, can't they see I'm a good person? I mean, why do we have to go through all this? The anger was always, simmering underneath, that we were subject to such scrutiny. And of course, again, you mentioned the financial aspect is or it's deep. And so, there is a lot of, um, there's a lot of resentment, and you have to just steel yourself and move beyond that, because again, keeping your eye on the end goal is the most important thing.
Yeah. I want to go back to that point you're talking about with that frustration regarding how having a magnifying glass on every little aspect of your life. Can you talk a little bit more about that
Mhm.
regarding what parents can be aware of or expect when it comes to these inspections, whether it's the psychological, the physical, financial, and household inspections that are going to be coming?
Well, it's all of those things, and my advice is just be yourself and be honest, because in we explored a number of different adoption agencies, and we obviously decided in the end to go international. But several of the open adoption agencies that we explored would ask for videos, and this was years ago, but they were not. So there's a lot, probably more of that now. Video testimony. How did you get to this place? What are you like as a person? How do you interact with your spouse? What kind of mother do you think you'll be? All these questions that needed to be answered via video. So you're talking to a possibly a birth mother, and you're being judged and measured. And the only thing you can do is present yourself honestly and as forthrightly as you can, to make sure that your intentions are known, that you want a family.
Yeah. I think that could be very, very, very helpful for parents to have that understanding of it's not just about, oh, I really want a child, but it's about the person that you're going to be taking into your house. There's so much preparation that's needed as well. And I will get back to like, okay, so how does a person prepare for it at home? But I first want to talk a little bit more about just that feeling of when someone gets pregnant, they have a couple of months, if not even beforehand, to start preparing
Mhm.
for being a parent at a certain day, whether it's a planned
Right.
date or an unplanned date. But when it comes to adopting a child, even though you understand that there's a date that you are going to be getting the child, it's a little more instantaneous. Can you talk a little bit about what and having experienced that, I'm curious what would be the differences or what parents can know about becoming an instant parent without having to go through those labor pains, and how a person can well, even though there are labor pains, but a different type of labor pains when it comes to getting that child. But in general, the difference between going through pregnancy and then becoming a parent, and then becoming a parent without having to go through pregnancy and being an instant parent.
Well, it's funny they say that, um, I had always heard that your mother would recognize her child's cry, and so after I had my daughter, I could hear her crying before she was brought to my room, and you're obviously there's this bond, but keep in mind we adopted our daughter when she was 7 years old, and we had had a series of calls translated for us. Uh, when we would call the orphanage every Sunday for almost a year before she came to live with us. And I'm sure she was thinking, who are these people? I mean, they're just so I don't think things were explained to her. So our situation is a little bit different. We were we were somewhat used to, hearing her voice and asking her questions. But the moment she came to live with us, that was really something. All of a sudden, think about it. She was in Mexico one day, and then the next day she went to sleep in suburban Philadelphia. And she was just, uh, she was beyond confused and didn't speak the language. And, at the time I didn't realize all that she had really lost. So I was only thinking about, oh, at last our family is together. Isn't this wonderful? But the transition, took years. So it really depends on the type of family that you're kind of pulling together. And some happens through marriage, two families come together. Um, and adoption can happen at all different ages and stages. And sometimes there are sibling groups, but in our case, it was, it takes a while for these transitions to happen. So that's my parting thought.
Yeah, I think that that bond doesn't happen overnight. A tree doesn't grow overnight, and I think for
Right.
parents to understand they're in this for the long run, and you want to be able to be there for your child on that first day, and walking them down to by their wedding, and maybe making you a grandparent as well. So I think that's really something that it doesn't just happen in an instant. And yes, you became an instant parent, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be have that
Mhm.
instant bond in that parenting of that child. So we talked about the bond, we've talked about the everything that leads up to and being able to actually become a parent. And I think there are so many things that can happen within that relationship that changes over time. And I'm sure from when you started this journey to when you look back at it now, you think about, oh my gosh, oh, those things that I didn't even know to even think about when it came to the adoption process, and
Mhm.
and bringing this child and making them a part of the family, and us a part of their family. When it comes to the child asking questions about themselves, their origin, and how it sort of came about from them being into your family, and also from your decisions to bring that child into the family. How can a
Mhm.
parent go about dealing with those questions that come from a child?
Yes. Well, the best advice, excuse me, that I've read and have implemented is just be honest about every aspect of adoption. And if you're adopting an infant or a very young child, children want to know their stories. They want to know where they come from, how did all that happen. And in being honest about adoption and even open about the concept of adoption before that concept is even understood by the child, I think is really important because that's their story of how they came into the family. So let's be honest about that. Let's celebrate that. And, with every possible family decision, communicate you are loved, you are wanted, you are part of this family. And for us, we had a biological child. So there was that competition, that little bit of rivalry that existed and still exists. They're 28 and 29. And So it's really, really interesting, but you're constantly trying to obviously do the best you can, but honesty and as much information as possible is
So
crucial.
I wanted to delve into that point. I'm happy you brought that up because that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. When there is a family that has a child or multiple children, and then they adopt, I think that that always in the back of someone's head might be, well, you love them more, or and there's a
Mhm.
level of a bond that you have with them that you'll never have with me, and it could alienate that child. So I'm curious when it comes to dealing with that right in the moment, and it could be different from different ages, from when they're 7 and 8 to they're 8 and
Mhm.
28 to 28 and 29. How can parents go about dealing with that in a way where not just all parties are happy, but it's the most beneficial for the short and long term in those type of such
Mhm. Mhm.
situations?
Well, there's no one magic parenting, advice or school of thought that I can give except make time for each child individually, which I understand maybe we had two. So maybe if there are more, that is obviously a challenge. But that's what I tried to do. And I honestly, I don't think I did enough. But each child, has, well, her own, I'll say her because we have two girls, her own gifts, her own interests, her own personality. And as we began to see those personalities unfold, we already knew our older daughter, our biological child. And most of the time, I mean, it did crack us up. They were completely different personalities, only and exacerbated by the fact that one was trying to learn English and speak English. So it was always, again, the rivalry was there, and our younger adopted daughter was trying to play catch up a lot of times. But you just try and be as even as you can and make those decisions um, with the thought that each girl had to be her own
Yeah,
self.
and I think there are probably so many stories, and I'm like watching your face as you're talking over here, of different types of examples that have come up over the years from grade school, middle school, high school, and beyond, and just seeing so many different scenarios of, well, you love them more, or well, it's not fair that blank,
Mhm.
whatever it is. I think that's something that that is common in even in families that have only biological children.
Exactly.
So
Right.
so I think having a child that was not born to either mom or dad or both of them, I think it could add to that, and really make it something that could be an issue in the household. And I think when you talk about spending time with a child and having a child feel valued for who they are, and having a sense of, oh, I am important because of me, and giving that time. And I think there could be a
Mhm.
mixture of both spending the time as parents with that child and also individually with
Mhm.
that child. And it doesn't have to
Right.
even be leaving the house and doing their favorite activities outside the house, but it could be within the house, from favorite dinner to TV show to board game, and
Right.
and doing
Cooking,
exactly,
baking cookies.
exactly, yes. And having that, this is what this child wants to do, so that's what we're going to do. And I also think when we're talking about that, just to add a little bit more to that, I mean, I know you're more the professional in this one than me, but having a sense of, okay, so as a family, since Saturday nights we do baking, so tonight's going to be Joey's turn to pick what it is we're going to be baking, and as a family, picking what that individual wants. So it's not just about giving that individual attention for what they need, but I think
Exactly.
also within
Yeah.
the family to say, hey, they also have a say. They are just
Right.
as important, and giving them a voice. I think
Right.
that goes a very, very long way. So, uh, do you mind sharing maybe one or two of those? Well, when you look back at it now and laugh about those type of stories that have happened over the years, where one child will try to pin the other one based on, I guess, the biological factor within the family dynamics.
Well, the only thing, the thing that's coming to my mind is, again, I mentioned they were two opposite, and naturally, with someone who is struggling to write and read English, let's just say homework was not her favorite activity. Our other daughter happened to be in the gifted program, and she was straight A. She loved to read, and she was a wonderful student, musician. But our younger daughter, as it evolved, she spent so many creative hours, so much creative time trying to get out of homework. It was somewhat hilarious. So we were always, catching her. Um, they had something called reading Olympics. And maybe all kids have that. And our older daughter, read all the books, was captain of the reading Olympics team, and her daughter, got the T-shirt, went on the bus trip, but then later we found out she had not read one of the books that was she just went along and just BS'd her way through. It was really, you know, it's so comical. So, a lot of those things ended up with us just laughing hysterically. Some of them were not so funny, but she was just, kept us entertained with a lot of
Oh,
this.
wow. And I'm sure you have so many more stories on that, but that is a really good one. And I'm curious, you look back at it now, and there you are, over 20 years of from when you adopted your daughter, and having this family. What would be like one or two things that you would want that younger version of you as a parent to know that
Mhm.
you can say now?
Well, so here was the turning point that I didn't really mention, because we started to talk about adoption beginning with separation, grief, and loss, which is so important for any family to keep in mind, no matter how magical the delivery of that baby is, or the child, whatever. When I began to just notice this pattern of behavior, which was, making up stories, or crying, or temper tantrums, or the things that we were dealing with, I started to read more about it. And the book, The Primal Wound, opened up a whole new world for me. So this was had to be 2 or 3 years after the adoption, when I was just seeking more information. Of course, we were seeing some therapists, working together as a family and with our daughter individually. And this concept of adoption beginning with grief and loss was so powerful for me to understand that, and has, transformed how we approach things, how we did our parenting, and again, sought help with therapists. So if I would have known that earlier, now all these years later, that concept is out there. I've read, I'm part of adoption groups on Facebook and whatnot, and folks talk about that. But back then, it wasn't as well understood or known. And from that point on, I think, I began to understand how much she had lost. What does it mean to be adopted into a totally strange country, different family, and get used to all that? So that took a while for me to understand, and I wish that had happened
Have you
earlier.
ever had an opportunity to talk about that with her yet?
Yes. Oh, yes.
I'm
And
curious what that conversation was like.
she yeah, she downplays it a little bit, because she is. I mean, I'll dare to say she's happy now. She's of course she's a college graduate. She's in a very professional position. She is actually helps out in the Hispanic community. She did reclaim her language. She's totally fluent in Spanish. She lost her Spanish within 3 months. And although we were encouraging for her to try and retain it, there was some anger there. She said, why did you adopt me if you can't even speak Spanish? Well, all that became a non-issue, within a few months, because she spoke English, could not speak Spanish at all. But then as middle school approached, middle school and high school, and she was, began to take Spanish in class, I think hearing it came back to her, and it was like a flood.
Wow.
And when she um, entered college, she was almost fluent by the time she entered college. And I just saw a complete, change in her, more confident. She, you know, was not as just more just forthright with all of her personal information.
That's great. And I think a lot of where something like that comes from is when a person is looking to have an identity, they'll just have the blinders on in order to get to whatever it is they're wanting to get to. And once they become comfortable in what it is that they're doing, i.e., the family that they're with, and acclimating into a new culture and a new society, so then it's like, okay, I'm good where I am. So now I could be a little more curious about other things. And I think one of the things that you're saying as well
Mhm.
is we don't necessarily lose a language of our birth. And even though it may get closed up and the key may be thrown away, but when we start to explore, when we become curious to those things in the past that we've become accustomed to when we were younger, the floodgates start opening up, and it just like there's a connection,
Mhm.
which in the therapy world, when we talk about inner child work and how a person can connect to the inner self, I think that's something that anytime we embrace something that we have been doing or were doing when we were younger, it's a way to connect to the inner versions of ourselves. So that's, I think, one very good area of we talk about of dealing with the grief of self in order to deal with the loss and the grief that your daughter was going through. I'm curious if there's one more thing that you can think
Yes.
about that, looking back now, 20 years later, that you were like, I wish Anna Marie knew this.
Mhm. That was the well, just finding my voice, I guess, a little bit earlier, because even though I knew these things, uh, it's been so rewarding for me now to write the books and have that message for parents. So, uh, my first book, called Many People to Love, my first children's book, is really about sort of identifying not adoption love, but adoption trauma in the separation. And then How I Wonder Where You Are. It was my second book. And it was really permission given for adoptees to recognize that there's trauma and grief in their lives. And then the third book, oh, and all of these are actual, events from our family life, uh, is about language and being asked to read out loud in English when English was not her first language. In the book, she crawls underneath the teacher's desk, and that actually happened to my daughter, and she got detention for that. So I didn't realize that until some 20 years later when I'm writing this book. So some of her day to day struggles, I think I could have um, maybe I could have been more
Mhm.
attentive to those, but now I think I'm really very passionate about communicating these messages to uh, adoptive parents, potential
Well,
adoptive
thank you for bringing that up, because
families.
I think my next or sort of last two questions to talk about was advocacy and also talking about your books. So you really started on that a little bit here, but just to touch on that a little bit more. So as parents are acclimated and they're in a place where, okay, so now we're a family, and it may be some sort of a blended family or from different cultures and stuff. How
Mhm.
and where can parents sort of um, look to be an advocate for children and for families that have been adopting?
You mean parents who are
Yes,
adoptive
yes, correct. I was
parents, or
specifically the parents, and because to be a little even more specific here, you talk about storytelling, and I think storytelling is a very, very big part of advocacy work, and being able to make a difference for others. So as you're wanting to help, or as another parent might be wanting to help other parents that could be facing similar challenges when it comes to the different stages
Mhm,
within
mhm.
adopting, where can parents sort of look to be that advocate? And I want to hear a little bit about your work that you've done within that as well.
Well, connecting, the number of groups on Facebook that are very supportive and encouraging for parents facing any multitude of issues with adopted and foster children. And that's really, I see that as very, very beneficial. There are many agencies out there that have adoption coaches for parents anywhere along the journey that are looking for some sort of guidance or support. I've done that on just a pro bono basis, just listening to folks that are kind of either waiting for children but there are psychologists trained as adoption coaches for scenarios that present themselves within adoption families. So if there is, I say three things for adoptive families is to really, as I said, network with other adoptive families, do your research. So like books like Primal Wound and just what are the theories out there that explain what trauma and grief is for an adopted child. And then just, being honest with yourself, with your partner, with your children, where you are on that journey, and then seek, professional help when you do need it. Professionals helped us along the way at various times. We changed therapists, as I said, along the way as our daughter grew and her problems changed. So it was really important that we kind of
Yeah,
stay
that's I
attuned to
think
that.
that's a very, very important point of parents realizing, and this applies to I think to all of us, not just adoptive parents, of for what your child needs and for what you might need if you're going to be seeking professional help for it. Different situations and different stages and different times in your life call for different therapists, and you don't get a prize for being with your therapist for long periods of time. And
Right.
I think that's
Right.
something that, as a therapist myself, that's something that I talk about because you have to do what's best for you, and obviously what's best for your child. And I think that's a very, very important point when it comes to this, as a person is seeking to help and finding those people that could be coaches to help them within this journey. So it goes a very long way to know that you have the right to switch therapists at any time, and I'm a very big advocate of that. So thank you for sharing that and for validating me in that sense. I do want
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
I
No,
do want
that
to say
was
one
very
thing
helpful.
regarding the trauma aspect of things, and something that I talk about in my office a lot when it comes to when I'm giving workshops or talking about trauma, or how a person accepts or how they experience trauma is different in every single person. And I think it's important for people to know that most traumas happened because of or through relationships. And it's also through relationships that we heal from trauma. So a child that is being brought into a new country, it's brand new. There's a relationship that didn't work out in a certain way, whatever it is, and now they're going to a new place. That's very, very difficult for a child. But the best form of treatment for that child is through relationships, and to enhance and to work on those relationships. I think is a very, very important point. And talking about it and
Mhm.
having that
Mhm.
something that is out on the table and being able to, like you were just saying before, you wish you could have been there a little bit more for those mundane everyday things that your daughter needed. It's through those little connections and through those relationships that we are able to help others heal from their traumas, and hopefully ourselves being able to heal from our traumas as well. So
Mhm.
that's a
Mhm.
very, very good point. So thank you for bringing that up. Is there maybe one or two points that we haven't talked about today as we sort of wind down when it comes to adopting, when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to having a relationship with the entire family that maybe we haven't talked about, that you usually do talk about when it comes to both your journey and overall advice towards
Mhm.
adopting?
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is when you say the word orphanage, maybe there's a certain image that's in your mind. And because our daughter came to us at 7 years old, we had the privilege or the luxury of seeing and experiencing her world prior to living with us. So we went to the orphanage, and much to our uh, surprise, delight, relief, the women in the orphanage were the most loving and caring uh, women that you could possibly hope for a child that you're planning to add to your family. For many years, we still keep in touch with these women. The director of the orphanage, she's done tremendous things in Mexico, changing how children are cared for in Mexico. She no longer participates in adoption, but the rules and the laws around adoption in Mexico have changed. So that's kind of neither here nor there. But our daughter was able to do a study abroad program in Mexico, and had been in touch, and through Facebook has been in touch with many of the children where she knew. And so it's really important to just understand, whether it's an infant or a child at any age, to understand the environment and the circumstances of uh, uh, their birth, their childhood, their toddlerhood before they come to she
Wow.
comes to
Okay.
your home.
Thank you so much for that. As we wind down over here, and you did say really funny story when it comes to your daughter and stuff. So it's usually one of the questions I usually like ending with. So just two short questions over here. First for you, is there a book or a podcast or someone that people can follow, just that's not your own, that people can get more information from when it comes to learning about the process of adoption?
Well, uh, there's a newsletter that I get gift. Oh, geez. Um, Growing Intentional Families Together gift. And it's run by some psychologists that specialize in adoption. I think they have adoption coaching. And there's also a woman, Pamela Karnikova, who is an adoptee. And there are many adoptees now that, again, are in all these Facebook groups, who are trying to bring more attention to the concept of grief and loss, and just the healing that adoptees need to, just what needs to be processed for them to be to live their lives. And every adoption is unique, just as you said, the trauma, and every adoption is unique. So I'm not generalizing, but everyone, adoptees need to come to that place of acceptance. And how they do that is, there's, as I said, this woman, Pamela, it's Karnikova, and I'm not going to try and spell that, but she is an adoptee that has kind of a robust presence online and has a lot of good food for thought
Okay.
for
And
adoptees.
we will try to get a hold of these and post links to it in the show notes description. The website for the newsletter is giftfamilyservices.com. And you can sign up for the letter over there, and we will put show notes in there. My last question for you today, and I'm sure we could talk for much longer than we have today so far, but if there would be a mundane, regular superpower that you would like to have as a mom, what would that be?
To know my daughter's innermost thoughts.
To read your daughter's minds.
To
Yeah.
read their minds, of course. Yes. What are they actually thinking? 'Cause, I mean, things change. They're off on their careers now. But it was not easy for either of them to kind of be thrown together. As I said, totally different personalities. And, but they're close in a funny way. The older one just got married, and, they- they're, they're, they're different, but they're close. They're not close. So we're still evolving,
Amazing.
which is kind of
Well, this has been an absolute
cool.
pleasure. And where can people find more about you and your books?
Yes. Well, my website has a lot of information, pictures, and some of the resources that I provide for those connected to that are interested in children's books. My website is amdidio.com. That's my name, amdidio.com. And I have a little bit more about our story, as I said, some photos from Mexico, and connections, links to podcasts and some of the articles I've written on Medium. So there's lots there to explore, as well as links to purchase the books on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And if you like the books, please leave a review. I'd love to hear
Amazing.
your thoughts.
Well, Anna Maria, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Hey again. I hope you were able to learn as much as I did today. Thank you so much for staying to the end and listening to the entire interview. Please feel free to leave a comment wherever you listen to this podcast. All comments will be read weekly, and we appreciate all feedback and ideas. If you have an idea for a guest or a specific topic, please feel free to share. Additionally, you can contact us at parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for joining today, and remember, parenting is a journey. Don't forget to enjoy it. The goal is to be a little better today than yesterday, and hopefully better tomorrow than we were today.